Hello, everyone. Welcome to AAS YouTube channel. And Chris, Impey, and I are going to be covering other aspects of bringing your course online quickly, tools and tips. And this module is going to be on exams, in particular proctored exams in online and in-person environments, sort of in general. So we have a couple of topics to cover today, and Chris, would you like to lead off on any aspect?
Sure. Well, just to frame the issue, the obvious issues here, instructors are aware of what they think they have to do to secure the exams when they're in person. And like if you teach a large class and you don't know all your students, you're going to be checking IDs, or you're not going to assume that the person that's sitting there taking the test is the person who's supposed to be taking the test. So there's all sorts of things. Some people use clickers and have IDs attached to clickers. And so there are various ways of knowing who someone is when they take a test in front of you, most directly, the fact that you know they're a student in your class. Online, the immediate, reflexive concern is, well, how do you know it's that student as opposed to their dog, or their more likely their smarter brother or cousin or a friend who studies science, who's actually doing that work online. So that's, the proctoring industry, the online proctoring industry, is set up to address that issue because it's a natural concern. And I guess it's fair to say, again, as overarching comment, that there's no perfect solution to this. I mean, there's, that there are mechanisms they use, and some of them are quite labor intensive, actually. There are also automated ways you can do it. I mean, you can have tools when you're taking a test online that know whether you've opened another browser, and so are looking something up alongside, or even in a timed test. So we'll talk about some of these mechanisms, and in a sense, the best ones, the most effective ones, are paid services, and your university, is going to have to support them. So whatever we say, you're going to almost immediately want to look at what your university does and who they're in bed with and who they support, or who they've used to support this activity, because that's going to be your choice.
And some of the more popular ones that universities use are things like Proctoring U. I have experience with that one. Radius, Respondus, lockdown browser. I've experienced with that one. OnView I've used. Examity is another one. Metal, Verificient is another. AIP Proctor, ExamSoft, Procteria. There's a whole host of these. I'm not going to do a product review. I'm not going to say the pluses and minuses of what each one is. But there are a number of products out there, and they all have various market penetration within various segments of the university. So there's not a single dominant player with a market capability.
And what if you were just going to say, what's the sort of a couple of go-to features you would want to look for in one of these services, given that they're all going to tout various strengths and they're not going to be quiet about their weaknesses, obviously?
I would say one thing that you need to look at, and some of it maybe you're just locked in because this is the one that your university uses, but if one had a choice, I think there's certainly what you would probably want to look into or learn a little bit about is sort of the various definitions of what it means to do an online proctoring, because there's different definitions between products. On the one extreme, so to bound it on one end, you have almost a completely automated proctoring situation where there's a completely scanned video, running at 30 frames per second. And they will run basically AI type of algorithms on top of it to detect, bringing up, we'll talk about various online cheating modes, but for behavior that shouldn't be happening, let's put it that way. But there's no human in the loop at all. It's completely automated. Then there are ones that do screenshots every n seconds, where n is chosen to optimize some sort of disk space or a throughput on the compute. And those can also be AI scanned. And then sort of working toward the other extreme, where you've got there's definitely an industry where they will do screenshots every n seconds, and those are human scanned. And then at the other end of the extreme, you've got full 30 frame per second video, and yes, somebody, I won't say where most of those people are hired from, are human looked at. And they are literally one person watching typically 15 to 20 screens at once, watching 20 students take an exam. So there's a whole range. So just because you say online proctoring, what does that really mean? And do those have an impact on your class? Is one preferable to the other? Almost all of them, when an event occurs, it'll be flagged, and it usually comes back to the instructor to make the ultimate call. I mean, that responsibility hasn't gone away. And so you still will have the authority to say, this is cheating, this is not cheating, this was allowed, this is not allowed. Oftentimes, different instructors will have different requirements on their exams, what they will allow and what they will not allow in an exam. And sometimes those don't always get communicated fully to the company. And so they may be applying sort of a template where you're going to allow the Google bar calculator, for example. And they may flag that as not okay. And so there are communication issues with customization of different courses within the different products that are available. Mm-hmm. So first thing, to get back to your question, Chris, so the first thing would be, know what kind of proctoring you're getting into, because this will impact decisions that you will make.
And also it sort of ties to what kind of an exam you want to do. I mean, do you want to do the analog of an open book exam where someone can answer whatever questions you put in front of them with a browser open and looking at whatever material they can find online or want online, because you're asking a question that's so clever it's going to find out their knowledge regardless?
Google doesn't know about it.
So there's that. Or so yeah, your mode of doing an exam definitely matters.
Yeah, and I'll just say from what I do in my courses is I will typically run 2 exams are open book, open note, but they're not open friend. And so I, read the riot act on academic integrity and let them go. And then I usually will have 2 that are relatively low stake in a proctored environment. That's personally what I do. And as long as we mention academic integrity, let me mention a few issues that come up. As Chris mentioned, the first most obvious one is ID verification. They will all typically, before the class starts, it's a paid service usually, so you have to sign up for it, and they will do the ID verification within the first week of course, so that by the time the exam comes, they already have IDs and photo scans of who's taking the exam. But that's not immune. There are technical hacks one can do. Virtual machine hacks where the person who's sitting there is not really the person taking the exam. So there are technical hacks. You can find out about them if you like, but that is one. And oftentimes in these proctored environments, they will have you have to have a webcam, of course, and they will have you show the room. They'll have you show the workspace that you're at. They'll, so what they're looking for is cheating notes on the sides of walls, on the computer itself, on the thing. And so usually they're required to do a scan with the camera, and they put the camera back. Of course, there's all kinds of, magician type sleight of hand you can do with paper, good old paper and pencil cheating notes, right? That have and do get done. There is, of course, the...
and just as a humorous extension of that, in a ProctorU example I know of, wasn't actually me, but it's one of my colleagues. They were, worried about that, the buddy in the room issue, feeding and whispering in their ear or whatever, or just off camera whispering. And so they the proctor in this case, the remote proctor, made them take the webcam off and not just, you know, scan it around the room, but point it under the desk, under the table, you know, in case the buddy was sitting at your knees, you know, under the table, under the desk where the computer was sitting, and so on. That's a high degree of scanning the room to see if there's anyone lurking there.
And then of course there's always devices, and devices are getting smaller, and you know, a phone's kind of obvious, but it can be palmed and had. There's watches, for a while, these glasses that could, you know, take pictures of stuff. And there are websites, for example, Socratic and Photomath, where all you have to do is take a picture, an image of a problem, and it will pop the answer right back up in front of you within a few seconds. So there are certainly sites out there that will enable this sort of academic integrity violations at a technological level. Then there's the good old human ones. Typically, and again, it depends how you want to run your exams. So what I will do is I will open up an exam for the whole week. Students can take it anytime during that week because there's different work schedules, people around the globe. I can't schedule, you know, you're going to take it from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard. If your course can do that, that's great. It will help you with this particular cheat. But if you're more wider or global than that, or you've got a different type of audience. So it's called the sacrificial lamb. And so one person will get on there and they will fail the test, but they will know all the questions and they will relay them to N of their buddies. And so those N will do really great. And so you can see why it's called the sacrificial lamb strategy on the cheat. So.
Right. Now the countermeasure for that, which I think people, you know, are pretty familiar with using in a face-to-face class traditionally, is to make unique versions of your test for each person, to draw from a big enough test bank, to randomize, you know, the subset of questions that you give them, and randomize the order and the answer orders. And so that if it's a physical setting, the two people sitting next to each other are not dealing with the same test anyway. So if they glance at each other's test, it doesn't help them. So you can obviously do that online too.
Yeah, and there's statistical tools as well you can use. Okay, these 8 students all mysteriously had exactly the same wrong answers and right answers. So there are some tools. If you're just getting up and going very quickly online, it's just something to be aware of. You may not have necessarily a large test bank to do randomized questions from, unless you pick up something, you know, like Mastering Astronomy or something along those lines, where there are test banks. Calculators are a good one to deal with in an online proctoring environment, assuming you're doing some sort of a quantitative aspects to your exams. Whether or not you allow any online calculator or a very specific online calculator, whether you allow physical calculators. And generally you have to be flexible because not everybody's going to have a physical, or not everybody's going to be comfortable with an online calculator. So these are issues. And of course, once you allow a physical calculator, they will usually do a lot more than just 2 times 2, right? They will do all kinds of things for you. So these are just issues that there's no golden silver bullet that will solve. So you just need to be aware of the issues and kind of figure out what your path is on how you're going to allow all of these items.
And I think I don't know what your sense of the flagging rate of this in our type of, say, intro astronomy class or planetary science class is. You know, it tends to be quite low. I mean, you should not worry about, if you move online, suddenly you're just going to flush out a ton of cheaters from people who were on the fence, and, you know, you're nudging them to the dark side just by the act of going online. I don't think anyone should. That's an important thing to sort of allay the fear.
Worldwide hacking networks will suddenly come into your course, and everyone will go.
You know, most people are going to do their own work. Most people are going to be honest. The tools we've talked, or Frank talked about, the sort of automated aspect of this proctoring, these tools that use some machine learning and AI methods, and but the core of them are pretty simple. I mean, you know, someone who's, you know, doing excessive eye movements, or, you know, their attention is clearly not in front of them for the you know, significant fraction of the time they're taking the test. That's just so obvious, and it's very easy to flag, and it's dramatic because it does demarcate someone who's just doing the job and someone who's doing something else.
Right.
So those tools, you know, they're, of course, they're not flawless either because they're statistical and they're based on usage patterns, but those usage patterns are pretty reliable to define, I think.
Yeah, and those are the ones that you're going to get asked to make a decision on based on
Right.
what you see and whatnot. And I'll just echo what you know Chris has said. The rate of cheating is low. It's certainly, you know, no greater, no less than what you would get in person. So it's just the modes tend to be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just look over at somebody's paper anymore. But yeah, it's just, you need to be aware of it. It's an academic integrity issue. And part of that academic integrity issue, certainly what drives or tempts people more to do academic integrity violations is high stakes versus low stakes testing issues. And I just find it an interesting route where it comes from. High stakes, of course, originally comes from the gambling world, where you have high stakes gambling. And it's not that the high stakes are the characteristic of the test or exam itself, but it's the consequences of the test. So common examples, driver's license test is high stakes because it affects your legal ability to drive or not. And so we're all familiar with, you know, high stakes, right? You have to pass the medical test if you want to practice medicine. And that's a high stakes kind of test. And so in the realm of astronomy courses, it's usually, right, your final is worth 50 or more percent, let's say, of your total. And so it's something to think about, particularly with regard to learning outcomes and what is sort of the best learning modality. And Chris, you have anything you want to say about learning?
Yeah, I mean, I think even from where I've been as an instructor over the years, you know, I've certainly migrated towards more, you know, continuous assessment, you know, with lower stakes assignments and not too much, not a big stakes final or even, you know, 2 midterms and a final together being 80% of the grade, which is still pretty common. That's not an unusual way for people to go. So that, you know, that sort of juices up the stakes to the point of, I won't say it induces the, you know, the cheating online, but it, you know, it increases the probability that it could happen. And the anxious students are the ones who want to cut a corner, will just see that they have to, because otherwise they're not going to get out of the class with the grade they want. So the sort of the flavor of the high stakes versus low stakes is, I mean, I guess the way I would put it is, it's a good idea to have a class which has more frequent touches with the students, and, you know, where they are doing things, and sometimes they're just participation. I mean, literally, they're just they're getting some participation points, and it doesn't have to be the majority of their grade, but it can be a significant enough fraction that they pay attention to it. Or you can have work, and this is, again, equally true face-to-face or online, you can have them do very short writing assignments, reaction to a news story, you know, just short couple of paragraphs. And again, it can just be the act of doing it. And, you know, even in a big class, you can quickly scan them and just decide whether they deserve that participation credit. Or you can have them do a very short piece of writing with a very simple rubric and a very simple instruction, and grade it again on a 1 or 2 or 3 point scale. And yeah, I've done that for 150 or 200 students, and you don't want to do it all the time or every week, but it's fine to do. It keeps students engaged, and all of that in the aggregate, that sort of more continuous assessment and participation credit and low stakes assignments that may just not even get graded sometimes, or get graded on a very crude scale. It's easy to implement. That sort of that acts to take away the high stakes exam issue and problem.
Yeah, you probably have a better sense of the educational literature than I do. Is there some sort of a raging debate in the educational literature about high stakes versus low stakes, or is it sort of converged onto a particular?
I mean, I don't think it's not an emphatic it's not a debate that has a winning and losing position necessarily, except that the principle of continuous assessment and continuous engagement in a class is a positive thing. So I think the literature does speak to that. And so, you know, that just argues for distributing your evaluation throughout a semester or a quarter, and not, you know, not spiking it into small numbers of high stakes exams. And then the other aspect, which goes in the same direction, is that for large classes, and we're, you know, often talking about large classes because they're the most challenging for single instructors with maybe one TA, or maybe not some places to do, are, you know, you're doing multiple choice exams, and there's plenty of literature to show just how hard it is to, you know, to design high quality multiple choice questions with that are getting at what you want to get at, that have good distractors, that are balanced in their difficulty to generate the aggregate result that you want. That there's a literature on that, and it's hard to do. I mean, it's not easy. So if you're in the
Yep.
boat of having to give these high stake multiple choice exams online as the bulk of your awarding of a grade in a class, you're kind of putting yourself in a tough place just pedagogically, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I've been running for the last 2 years now in one of my online courses, Energy in Everyday Life. I've been experimenting with doing away with the final, completely. Final is optional, and so I do a very even assessment as the course goes through. And the advantage to the students is, yes, they're going to be assessed more often, but they don't have that big final at the end. So I find that works relatively well. Students seem to like it. Whether that works for you in your course,
Right.
something you will have to assess for yourself.
And if you do the, you know, there are obvious things to say, but if you do the more continuous mode of assessment, or more frequent lower stakes evaluation, you know, you can build a little suppleness into it, because this, you know, students have the issues, they get sick, they, you know, the student can have a bad week, they can have a slow start, they can, all sorts of things can happen. They can have a pile of midterms and they just didn't get enough time on your class. So, you know, allowing them to, if they have sort of 10 or 12 weekly assignments, allowing them to miss 2 or drop the load scores, whatever. I mean, that's just easy to do. Some instructors in our department have it, they call it resurrection points. They let you, for some assignment that you just messed up really badly, they let you have a do-over, you know.
Oh, okay.
But only one, or, you know, just, it's an occasional thing. And it sort of disproportionately makes students feel good. You know, it makes them feel like you're giving me a chance. I'm not just a number. It's not just a machine grinding along and then I get a grade, and there's no flexibility, there's no latitude, there's no do-over, there's no nothing. So, you know, throwing a few of these tools, these mechanisms in to sort of take away the purely mechanistic grading model, it actually helps. It's sort of disproportionately beneficial on the sort of morale, if you like, of the students in the class.
Indeed. Yeah. I'll just throw this out there, right? Because I know the 99% of the students in my course are just there to get their science credit. Oftentimes they are seniors, they've put off taking any science course, the very last one, the dreaded science course. So I will get quite a few of those. I get it. I'm okay with it. I'm not trying to make anybody an astronomer. I'm not trying to make anybody a scientist.
That's good. They wouldn't get a job anyway.
Well, yes, that's another issue. But for a lot of these people, it's the last science course they will ever take in their life, right? So I want them to have a good time. I want them to have fun. I want them to learn a little something. And perhaps hold on to it as they go forward. So I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I enjoy it, actually.
Right. Right.
All right. That'll do on this one for exams. We will be doing a couple more. We may have some other surprises coming up to let you know about. So we'll keep you informed of that. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.